Rollover accidents like these were common with the Chevy Corvair in the 1960s because of an unsafe design flaw in the rear suspension.
This little suspension thing here is what most of the controversy was about. And in Ralph Nader's book, you know, he talks about that and many other cars of its day. So what a lot of people don't realize is that this book is not just about a Corvair. It's about pretty much all cars of the era and the unsafeness of metal dashboards, non-padding, and obviously they didn't even have braking systems that had backup systems like they do today. So the book was really on the forefront of safety for vehicles, but the first couple chapters were dedicated to the Corvair, and that's what everyone remembered.
Yeah. Good.
Is that the rear wheels of the Corvair begin to tuck under. And as they tuck under, the angle of tuck under is called camber. And as they tuck under, it can go from 3 or 4 degrees camber to 11 degrees camber almost in an instant. And when that happens, nobody can control the Corvair.
Well, then surely they did the right thing. They found out there was something wrong with the car and they fixed it.
Yes, the question is, why did it take them 4 years to find out? This is my point. Either it's sheer callousness or indifference, or they don't bother to find out how their cars behave.
So they were building Corvairs from 1960 to 1969, so they had 10 years of production. They made almost 2 million of them. And they started out as the American version of the Volkswagen, the VW Bug. What happened was sales were a little bit tepid in the beginning, and GM quickly made a sporty version called the Monza. And the Monza was received very readily and quickly, and it really surged in sales at the end of 1960 when the car was first introduced. And it ended up kind of guiding the way for the rest of the vehicle as a sporty car instead of an economy car. And because it was they made it a little bit sportier, all of a sudden some of the suspension and the dynamics of the car, people were driving faster, they were taking corners faster because of the sportiness. Well, the suspension wasn't quite up to that kind of, let's just say, high motivated driving. So we walk out here, we have a series of cars. The first one here is a very unusual car. It's a 1962, it's a station wagon. They only made these for a couple years. Now, the Corvair was the first car to have a rear engine air-cooled setup in America. So I'll go ahead and open up the back here. This is a 62. It's being restored or going to be restored. It's from California. You can see the plates. And you open up the back, and underneath the cargo area is the engine. It's a flat pancake 6-cylinder engine, and they were a very smooth running, reliable engine, and I'm going to go ahead and start it for you right now.
Sounds good.
So, when it's down, you can put your luggage in the back, and they had this little trap door. If you wanted to check the oil, you could do it without taking your luggage out of the back if you were packed up tight. parts car, but I brought it out for today. And this is a 1964. And what they did is they were building convertibles now. They were sporty, and they changed something on the bottom suspension because of the tricky handling. And I don't know if you can see it, but you got to kind of bend down here. But if you get right down to the bottom, you can see there's a leaf spring that runs across the bottom there, and it's tied to each tire and each wheel, and then it's bolted on to the transaxle in the middle. And what that leaf spring did was to keep the tires from tucking in under hard cornering, which is what is displayed on my floor mats. So in '64, they recognized that they had an issue. They corrected it. And then in '65, they redesigned the entire car to look like this convertible over here. And that car had a completely reworked suspension, and no one ever thought it was a problem or dangerous. And in fact, one of the arguments that Ralph Nader made in his book, Unsafe at Any Speed, was the fact that they must, because they changed and improved the suspension, that was an indication that they knew that the old suspension wasn't right. That argument was discounted by the judge, because if you use that argument, you can never come out with a refrigerator, say when you were inventing refrigerators, and then come out with a better one. I mean, the progress of industry can't be second guessed. So you do evolve and things become safer. Last thing about the Corvairs that a lot of people don't know about is it was the first car in the United States to offer a turbocharged engine. So in here, watch you step on the ramp. If you come up this way, this is a '66 turbo coupe. It's under restoration as well. It's in the middle of being restored, but if you look in the back of the engine here, this engine has a factory-mounted turbocharger, side draft carburetor. The fundamentals of the engine are the same in that station wagon I started up for you, but this engine has 180 horsepower turbocharged, and it really it really drives like a much sportier car. They couldn't make a bigger engine because of the rear weight. They didn't want to add weight to the back. So instead of adding a bigger engine, they put in a turbocharger to make the existing engine faster. The idea of unsafe motors came from when I was driving the car. And let's walk out to this convertible for one last item. But if we go all the way to the end, and really the best looking car out there, that car has been completely restored. That car is up to factory standards for 1966. It has the correct everything, and everything is functioning. The thing about the car, and you can see the license plate's called Unsafe 2, is that even as a properly running, well-maintained, maintenanced vehicle, compared to today's car, this car is incredibly unsafe. You know, it doesn't have it does not have shoulder belts. It doesn't have airbags. It doesn't have a dual braking system where if you lose a brake line, you still have function of some of the brakes. This, if you lose a brake line, no brakes. And you can go down the list. And what really struck me is that even though this car I love to drive, it's a joy, compared to the modern day car, it is incredibly unsafe. It has no airbags, and if you do get in an accident, you know, you're going to get injured and possibly killed. And nowadays, you can get in some pretty bad accidents with today's cars and still walk away from it. And it all started really with a consumer advocate named Ralph Nader, who wrote a book on the fact that the auto industry had things like the fins that the Cadillacs used to have. I mean, some kids would ride their bike and get impaled by the fins of a parked Cadillac just because they were so sharp and they were so dangerous. And he went down all the list of things that were being done that were not in the interest of safety, and really turned the industry around. And you know, by today's standards, cars are much more safe, and they're much more reliable, and part of that was an evolution of the technology and fuel injection and what have you. But the other part was because Ralph Nader was insisting that cars become safer because they could be. One last safety item I forgot to mention earlier is the steering columns. On the earlier ones were just a big straight rod, so if you were in a front end collision, that rod could get pushed right into your throat. And then in the later ones, they made that column collapsible, so that if you did have that kind of accident, it wouldn't push back into the passenger compartment. And then today, you know, you go back with the airbags and everything, and it's tremendously safe. So. But what I do here is, you know, I enjoy the storage of the cars. I don't work on cars here. I only store them for working on at my house. And but I enjoy the beautiful scenic view of Falls Village. I love being on Route 7, and then every 3 times a year I do a little parking lot display, because the parking lot can kind of look kind of empty. So we're putting one together today for the Falls Village Car Show, which is July 10th.
How did you get interested in Corvairs, and how did you get interested in collecting them?
I was interested in them because they were unique automobile compared to every other automobile built in America. They you know, they were rear engine, they were air cooled, and they're actually very good cars. They were also very cheap because nobody wanted them. And I took that brown one with the turbo over to Lime Rock as a young man in 1986, and took it around the track with a bunch of other Corvairs in the Corvair Club, and I ended up winning my class, getting around the track faster than anyone else, and I was hooked. Falls Village has a very famous resident named John Fitch, who had a shop at 100 Main Street, where Bunny Williams' shop is now. But he would retrofit existing Corvairs and set them up and call them Fitch Sprints. He added performance items like a carburetor, suspension. He even had a roof line that he added to it, and they were unique and distinctive cars, much like Carroll Shelby would do with his Shelby Mustangs. John Fitch, right here in Falls Village, did Corvairs, and they were called Fitch Sprints. And John Fitch was instrumental at the track. He was instrumental with Corvairs, and he actually built a car for production that was going to be called the Phoenix, and it was based on a Corvair powertrain. And unfortunately, because of the Ralph Nader book, the rules for doing a limited production sports car and the safety requirements for that kind of car were not defined. They didn't get defined until 1968, and by then General Motors had pretty much started winding down production, so he couldn't build his car. But I do have a little model of the car. Would you like to see it?
Sure.
All right, let me bring it in here. So the car that John Fitch designed was important enough to have someone produce a toy model of it. They only produced 192 of these pieces. This is number 71. And it's never been opened further than this, but if you'd like I can put it down here. And this car exists still today in Connecticut.
That's a beauty.
Have a sticker.
Oh, thank you, Steve.
And again, it's all just kind of a joke. It's a hobby run amok.
Okay.
Do you have any questions?
No, I know very little about cars, Steve.
Okay.
So, well, this is good.
Great. I'm happy to do it. I'm glad we got good weather. It's a nice day. And where we are now, just to give you a little bit of more history about Falls Village, is this used to be called Houston's Garage, and this is what it looked like back in. We're going to think that shot is about 1950, 1952, and that's what this place looked like. It's been through a lot of changes.
Well, thank you so much, Steve.
Well, thank you, Eric, and I'm glad we finally got to do this.